The roar hit me before the gate did, that wet. Hungry sound 1,000 throats make when they have already decided a stranger is going to die for their pleasure. I had heard it 100 times from this same high stone seat, and I had hated it every time. My father built the thrashing ring to prove the strength of the Ashen Reach, and he taught me that a king sits above the pit and lets the crowd have its blood. I had buried him 3 winters back. I had not yet found the courage to bury the pit with him. So I sat as I sat every proving night, with my hands loose on the cold arms of the stone throne, and my face arranged into the stillness a king is supposed to wear. Below me, the torches guttered along the ring wall, throwing red light across the raked sand. The pit master, Osric, was working the crowd the way he always did, arms wide, promising them a night they would tell their grandchildren about. "A captive," he bellowed, and the court howled back at him. "Taken at the border where our wolves broke the raiders on the Sithra road. No pack, no name worth speaking, no one to weep for her." They dragged her out then, and something in the noise changed, not softened, only sharpened, the way a crowd sharpens when it smells an easy killing. She was small, that was the first thing. Small and thin under a gray shift that had been meant for someone larger, her wrists bound in front of her by an iron chain that ran back to 2 of Osric's men. Her dark hair had been cropped short the way they crop captives, and her feet were bare on the sand, and the torchlight found the hollows under her cheekbones. The court laughed. Of course it laughed. They had paid to watch a war captive be broken by our champion, and Osric had given them a slip of a woman who looked as if a strong wind would take her. 10 coppers she doesn't last a breath, a lord called from the tier below me, and the wager went up and down the stone benches like fire through dry grass, and the laughter came in waves. I looked at her because I could not help it. A king watches everything. It is half of what a king is for. And she was not afraid. That was the thing that turned my head. In 3 winters of proving nights, I had watched every kind of fear cross that sand, the shaking kind, the pleading kind, the frozen kind, the wild kind that swings before the gate is even open. I knew fear the way a smith knows heat. I could read it on a man across the whole width of the ring. She had none of it. She stood in the center of the sand where Osric's men had shoved her, and she did not look up at the tiers of jeering faces, and she did not look at the great iron gate on the far side behind which our champion waited. She looked down at the sand itself. She set her bare feet a little apart and shifted her weight from one to the other once, twice, the way you test ground before you trust it. She turned her bound wrists slowly, testing the length of the chain, the give of the iron, the weight of it. She rolled her shoulders back and let a long breath go, and I saw her whole body settle into itself like water finding its level. I had seen men do that before a killing. I had done it myself on the border in the cold before dawn. It is not the stillness of prey. It is the stillness of something that has already decided it will not panic whatever comes. My wolf stirred under my ribs, not the surge it gives before a fight, but a low, curious attention, the way it lifts its head when something on the wind does not match the world. Torin, my war-second Bran, leaned in at my shoulder. He was the only one in the Ashen Reach who used my name and not my title, and he only did it when he wanted me to actually hear him. "You've gone quiet." "I'm always quiet." "You've gone a different quiet." I did not answer him. Below, Osric had walked to the great gate and raised his arm for the crowd, and the crowd surged up to meet it, because they knew what the raised arm meant. "And to test our little captive," Osric roared, "to see if a raider's dog has any teeth at all, the pride of the Ashen Reach, the wolf who has not lost in the thrashing ring in 6 years, Kord. The gate came up on its chains, and Cord came out of the dark behind it, and the crowd lost its mind. He deserved the noise, I will give him that. Cord was the biggest wolf in my hold, and he knew it, a head taller than most men, slabbed with muscle, his bare arms scarred from a decade of proving nights he had always won. He carried a short pit blade in one fist, the curved kind Osric handed out to make the killings quick and loud. He lifted it over his head and turned a slow circle so every tier could see him, and the court screamed his name back at him until the torches shook. It was not a fight. It was never going to be a fight. It was a slaughter dressed as one, and Osric had built it that way on purpose, the champion against the chained captive, so the court could have the pleasure of the killing without any of the risk of a real contest. I should have stopped it. I want to tell you that. I want to tell you that I was already rising from the throne. I was not. I was a king who had let this custom run for 3 winters because it was easier than the fight it would take to end it. And I sat there with my hands loose on the cold stone, and I told myself, as I had told myself 100 times, that it was only the way of the ring. Then Osric's men unhooked her chain from their fists, and left the iron still locked on her wrists, and backed away fast through the small gate, and left her alone on the sand with Cord and his blade. And she looked up. For the first time since they had dragged her out, she lifted her head, and she looked not at Cord, not at Osric, not at the screaming tears. She looked at me. I do not know how she found me. The throne sits high and half in shadow above the torchline. From the sand, a king is only a shape. But she found me across all that noise and light as if she had known exactly where I would be, and she held my eyes for the length of one slow breath. I have gone into battle on the border. I have stood in the shield line when the raiders came out of the tree dark screaming for our blood. I know what it is to have the world narrow to a single point. The world narrowed. The roar of the crowd did not stop. I could see mouths open, fists in the air, Osric's arm still raised, but I could no longer hear it. It fell away from me all at once, the whole hungry ocean of it, and in the silence where it had been there was only her upturned face and a low sound behind my ribs that was not my heartbeat and was not my wolf and was, somehow, both. There she is, something in me said, in a voice I had never heard and knew at once. There she is, finally. The mark on the inside of my left forearm, the mark I had carried since I was a boy, hidden always under a bracer, the spiral knot my mother had pressed there with her own thumb the winter she died. The mark went warm. Not the phantom warmth of memory. A true heat, sudden and living, as if a coal had been laid against my skin. I had not felt it since the night she died. I had thought it only a scar. Down on the sand, Cord charged. I came up out of the throne. I do not remember deciding to. Bran told me after that I was halfway to my feet with a shout already in my throat, hold. But the shout never came, because in the half-breath it took me to rise, she had already moved, and what she did stopped the word in my mouth, and a moment later stopped the crowd's noise in every throat in the ring. She did not run. She did not raise her bound hands to guard her face. She did not do any of the things a chained captive does in the last moment before the blade. She stepped toward him. She stepped inside the charge, inside the reach of that curved blade, into the very place a person is never supposed to be, and she did it low and smooth and without a wasted inch, and Cord's downward cut went over her shoulder into empty air. In the same motion she brought her bound wrists up under his blade arm, hooked the chain over his wrist, and turned. She was a third his size. It did not matter. She turned the way water turns a wheel, using all of his weight and all of his speed against him, and Cord's own charge threw him past her and down, hard, face first into the raked sand, the pit blade spinning out of his fist to lie glittering 3 feet away. The ring went silent. Not quiet silent. 1,200 wolves who had come to watch a slaughter, and every one of them had swallowed the noise at once, because the thing they had just seen did not fit the world they had bought a ticket to. She stood over him. The chain still bound her wrists. She had not broken it, had not tried to. She simply stood, breathing slow, and looked down at the biggest wolf in my hold face down in the sand at her feet. Osric's arm was still half raised. He had forgotten it was there. "Get up," she said. Her voice was low and carried in the silence to the highest tier. There was no cruelty in it and no triumph. It was almost gentle. She said it the way you speak to a spooked horse. Cord got up. He came up roaring, shamed and furious, the way I knew he would. And he snatched the blade from the sand and came at her again, no charge this time, but a fighter's approach, low and careful, circling, the blade weaving. And I watched a captive with her hands chained together, take a proven killer apart with nothing but the way she moved. She never once tried to hurt him. I understood that only slowly as it went on. The Cord understood it not at all and sat in that stunned silence watching a thing they had no name for. Cord cut and she was not there. Cord fainted and drove in and she turned him past her. Twice more he went down into the sand, and each time she stepped back and gave him the room to rise, and each time she said, low, "Stop. You don't have to do this." Stop. He would not stop. Of course he would not. 1,200 wolves were watching him be unmade by a chained woman, and a wolf like Cord would sooner die than carry that. So the 4th time he came with everything, all his weight behind the blade, aiming not to win but to kill, to erase what the whole hold had just watched. She took the blade. I mean, she took it from him. But for one moment my heart stopped, because she let the cut come, let it come close, closer than any sane fighter would. And I was on my feet at the ring wall with my hands white on the stone and a killing rage rising in me that I did not yet understand. A rage that said if he cuts her, I will tear this hold down to the roots. And then she was inside it, and her chain was over his wrist again, and she rolled her whole body against his locked elbow, and the blade dropped, and she caught it as it fell, caught it in her two bound hands. The edge turned outward, the point at the hollow of Cord's throat where he had frozen, off balance, on one knee, entirely at her mercy. The ring did not breathe. This was the moment. Every soul in that place knew it. This was the moment the thrashing ring existed for, the killing the court had paid to see, and now it would be sweeter than any of them had dreamed, because it would be the champion's own blade and the captive's own hand, and no one would ever forget it. Do it the ring wanted. I could feel the want of it come off the tears like heat. Do it. Finish him. Take it. She looked at the blade at Cord's throat. Then she opened her hands and let it fall. It hit the sand between them and lay there, and she stepped back from him, one step, two, and stood with her chained wrists loose in front of her and her chest rising and falling, and she looked down at the man who had come 3 times to kill her, and she said quietly in that voice that carried to the last stone of the highest tier, "I'm not going to kill you, I've killed enough, so have you." She let a breath go. "We can both stop now." And she turned her back on him. She turned her back on a wolf twice her size with the blade a lunge away in front of 1,200 enemies, and she did it without hesitation, because she had already decided. I understood this later, when I knew her, that she would rather be killed with her back turned than take a life she did not have to take. Cord did not move. He knelt in the sand where she had left him, and he stared at her back, and his great chest heaved, and something broke open in his hard face that I had never once seen there in 6 years of watching him win. It was not anger. It was something closer to grief, and closer than that to gratitude, the terrible, naked gratitude of a man who has just been handed back his own life by the person he came to murder. I know that look now. I did not know it then. I only knew that my whole hold was staring at a chained captive who had beaten the pride of the Ashen Reach 4 times, and then refused, before all of them, to take the prize the ring was built to give. And I knew, with the certainty of the warm coal against my forearm and the silence where the roar had been, that whatever else was true, that woman was mine. Not to own, not to command, but mine the way the North Star is the North's, a fixed thing you steer your whole life by whether you have found it yet or not. Osric found his voice first. He would. "She yields," he shouted, scrambling for the story, for any story that would give the court its ending. "The captive yields. The champion, Cord stands, Cord takes the—" "She does not yield." My voice went across the ring, and Osric's mouth shut with a click. I had not planned to speak. A king weighs his words. I had built 3 winters of careful silence on that throne. But the words were out of me before the weighing, and once they were out, I found I meant them to the bone. "She won." I came down the throne stair as I said it, and every face in the ring turned up to me. 4 times she won, and 4 times she gave your champion his life back when the ring was screaming for her to take it. I reached the ring wall, and I did not stop at it. "Osric, open the gate." Osric stared at me. "My king." "Open the pit gate now." He opened it. I walked out onto the sand. A king does not walk into the thrashing ring. It is not done. It has never been done. The pit is for captives and champions, and the ring exists precisely so that the king may sit above it clean. 1,200 wolves watched their alpha king step down onto the killing sand in his own hall, and they did not make a sound, because they no longer had any idea what kind of night this was. I crossed the sand to her. She had turned when I spoke. She watched me come, and she did not step back, and she did not drop her eyes, and up close she was smaller still, and her eyes were a gray I have not found a name for in all the years since, the gray of the sky before snow, and there was in them a wariness that was not fear, and under the wariness something that made the coal on my arm flare so hot I nearly gasped. I stopped an arm's length from her. Behind me I heard Bran come through the gate. I lifted a hand and he stopped. "What is your name?" I said, not a demand. I had done enough demanding for one night, on this sand, in my father's ring. She studied me, the whole hold hung on it. "Eala," she said. "Eala." I said it back to her, and my wolf turned the sound over as if it had been waiting its whole life to hear it, which I have come to believe it had. You fight like no wolf in the Reach, like no one I have ever seen. Where did you learn it? From my mother. A muscle moved in her jaw, and her order, the Cethran Wardens. She lifted her chin a fraction, and there was the first heat in her voice, quiet and cold and old. You'll have heard of us. Your wolves broke us on the Cethra road. We didn't raid you. We were guarding a road that had never once been yours, and your border pack came through it like a scythe, and now I'm chained in a pit for your court to bet on. So don't ask me your questions like this is a courtesy, Wolf King. I know exactly whose hall I'm dying in. Somewhere above, a lord drew in a scandalized breath. No one spoke to the Alpha King of the Ashen Reach that way. No one had in 3 winters. I felt something in my chest that I did not expect. I felt glad. The Cethran Wardens, I said. You've heard of us. I have carried one of you under my bracer for 20 years. And I unbuckled the bracer from my left forearm, there in the middle of the thrashing ring, and I turned my arm to the torchlight, and I showed her the spiral knot my mother had pressed into my skin the winter she died. Ela went very still. I have seen a great many things stop a person. I had never seen anything stop a person the way that Mark stopped her. Every hard line she had built against me, the anger, the grief, the wariness worn smooth by whatever they had done to her since the Cethra road, all of it went out of her face at once, and what was under it was so young and so undefended that I had to hold myself still not to reach for her. That's a warder's knot, she whispered. That's a master's knot. You don't, a Wolf King doesn't. Her chained hands came up half-reaching and stopped. Who gave you that? My mother, I said. Her name was Salys. She came out of the south when I was small, and she never spoke of where, and she taught me to move the way you move inside the Reach, using their weight, never the killing blow if the controlling blow will serve. She said it was the only art worth the name because it was the only one that could choose to stop. My throat was tight. I had not spoken of her aloud in years. She died when I was 11. She pressed this into my arm the night before with her own thumb, and she said, "This is who you are under the crown they will put on you. Don't let them make you forget it." I looked at the sand, at the fallen blade, at Cord still kneeling and staring. I forgot it, I said. For a long time I forgot it. Then a chained woman walked into my father's pit and remembered it for me in front of my whole hold. The torches burned, the ring held its breath. Ela turned her own left wrist over, awkward against the chain, and showed me the inside of her forearm, where the same spiral knot was inked pale and old into her skin. Salys of the Grey Hollow, she said, and her voice had gone rough. She's in our chance. She's a ghost story. She was the warder who walked out of the Order 40 years ago and vanished, and the elders said she'd died on the road, and the young ones said she'd found a life somewhere and had the sense to keep it. A sound came out of her that was half laugh and half something that hurt. She found a life. She married a Wolf King. She raised... She stopped. She looked at me, at the crown of the Ashen Reach on my head and the master's knot on my arm, and understanding moved across her face like weather. She raised you. She raised me, I said. And I am beginning to think she raised you toward me, across 40 years and one broken road, so that you would walk into this pit tonight, and I would come down off that throne for the first time in my life. The coal on my arm and the ink on hers seemed to answer each other across the little space between us. I swear to you it was so, though I cannot tell you how, only that the warmth in my mark grew when her arm neared it and cooled when it drew away, like two ends of the same thing seeking the middle. The bond. I had been Alpha King 3 winters, and I had told my council, every time they pressed me to take a Luna, that the fated bond was a tale for pups and that I would rule without one. I had believed it. I stood in the thrashing ring with the bond ringing through me like a struck bell, and I understood I had never believed anything so wrong in my life. Ela of the Cethran Wardens, I said, and I said it loud now so that it carried, so that every soul who had come to watch her die would hear the next thing out of my mouth and never be able to unhear it. I am Torin, Alpha King of the Ashen Reach. My wolves wronged your order on the Cethra road, and I will answer for that to you for as long as you'll let me. And I am telling you, and I am telling all of them. I did not turn from her, but I lifted my voice to the tears, that the bond between us is a true one, and I would know it in the dark, and I have known it since you looked up and found me across this whole screaming ring. I heard the court break into noise behind me, shock, protest, 100 voices at once, and I did not care, and the not caring was the freest thing I had felt in 3 winters. But I will not do to you what this pit does, I said low again for her. I will not take. You came into my hall in chains, and I will not put a different chain on you and call it a crown. I went down. The Alpha King of the Ashen Reach went down on one knee in the killing sand of his father's ring, and I took the iron that bound her wrists in my 2 hands. Whatever you choose after this, you choose free. And I broke the chain. It was Warder's iron, forged to hold a fighting wolf, and I am strong, but I will not pretend it came easy. I felt it in my shoulders and my back for 3 days. It came, though. It came link by link, and the sound of it giving way was the only sound in all that vast stone place. And when the last of it fell to the sand, her wrists were free and marked red where the iron had ridden them. And I turned her hands over in mine and looked at those raw rings on her skin, and something in me that had sat cold on a throne for 3 winters caught fire and has not gone out since. There, I said, now nothing binds you. The gate is open. My word on it before the whole ring, you may walk out of here tonight a free woman, and any wolf who lifts a hand to stop you answers to me with his life. I made myself say the rest, though it cost me more than breaking the iron had, even if walking out means walking away from me. She looked down at me kneeling there. She looked at her freed wrists in my hands. She looked once over her shoulder at Cord still on his knees in the sand, and at the great open gate beyond him, and at the dark road past it that led, I suppose, back toward the Cithra and whatever was left of her scattered order. Then she looked back at me, and she knelt too, so that we were level, the way I think a warder is taught to meet another warder, eye to eye and neither above. You unchained me before you asked me anything, she said. You came down off your throne. You knelt in your own killing pit in front of every wolf who bets on death here. Her freed hand rose, slow, and her fingertips touched the master's knot on my forearm, and the warmth of it leapt up to meet her, and I saw her feel it too, saw her breath catch. Saley, son, she whispered, the bond's real. I've felt it since you stood up. I told myself it was the fight blood. It isn't. Her gray eyes searched mine. You'd truly let me walk out that gate. I would hate every step of it until the day I died, I said, and I would let you. Her fingers pressed the mark, the coal flared. Then I'll stay, Ila said, because it's mine to choose and I choose it, not because you're a king, not because of the bond, because you knelt in the blood sand and set me free first. A thing that was almost a smile touched her mouth, the first I had seen on her, and it went through me like sun through cloud. That's a warder's answer, Wolf King. You'd have made a good one. I do not remember rising. I remember that I was on my feet with her hand in mine, and that I turned us both to face the ring, and that I lifted our joined hands so that the whole hold could see the master's knot on my arm and the warder's ink on her side by side in the torchlight. Hear me, I said, and the Ashen Reach heard me. This is Ila of the Cithran Wardens. She beat your champion 4 times and gave him back his life 4 times, and she has done more honor to this hall in 1 night than this pit has done in 20 years. She is my fated mate, and from this night she is your Luna, and any wolf who forgets the mercy she showed on this sand will answer to me. And I think before long they'll answer to her and be the better for it. Osric had gone the gray of old ash. He came forward, wringing his hands, the pit master trying to find the shape of a knight that had escaped him entirely. My king, the wagers, the custom, the ring, it's always been. The ring is done, I said. The word went out over the tears, and the tears went utterly still. My father built this pit to prove the strength of the Ashen Reach, I said, and I have sat above it for 3 winters and let it prove only our appetite for other people's blood. That ends tonight. There will be no more killing knights in the thrashing ring. I looked at Cord, still kneeling. There will be a hall of the warder's art instead, where our young wolves learn what she just showed you, how to end a fight without ending a life, how to be strong enough to choose to stop. I looked back at Osric. You'll find other work. The betting book burns tonight. A murmur ran the tears, but under it, and then over it, something else began. And it took me a moment to understand what it was, because I had never heard it in that place before. It began with Cord. He got to his feet slow, and he looked at Ila across the sand. And then the champion of the Ashen Reach, who had not bowed to anyone but me in 6 years, went down on one knee again. But this time on purpose, this time to her, and he pressed his fist to the sand in the old warrior's salute, the one you give only to someone who has bested you and let you live. Luna, Cord said, rough, loud, so it carried. You had my throat, you gave it back. He struck the sand once more. You'll never want for a sword in this hold. Not while I draw breath. And the tears took it up. Not all at once, and not for Osric's reasons, and not because a king had commanded it. I want that understood, because it is the part I hold closest. They took it up because 1,200 wolves had come to watch a captive die for sport and had instead watched her spare the man sent to kill her. And something in them, some old buried decent thing the ring had spent 20 years grinding down, had seen it and known it for what it was. First a few, then a tier, then the whole vast stone hall of them. They came to their feet, and they bowed to her, to the small woman with the raw red rings on her wrists standing in the middle of the killing sand. And the sound they made was not a roar. It was a long, low, rising thing, closer to grief than to cheering. The sound a crowd makes when it is ashamed and grateful in the same breath, and does not have another way to say so. Ila stood in the center of it with her freed hand in mine, and she looked up at me, and she was not weeping, but her gray eyes were too bright, and she said under the noise only for me. My mother used to say the whole art was that you could always choose to stop. Her fingers tightened on mine. She never told me that stopping could do this. She told me, I said, the night before she died, I only needed you to make me believe it. I could end it there, and it would be the truth. But it was not the end. It was the beginning of the truest years of my life, and there are things that happened after, in the quiet, that I would not trade for the whole roar of that ring. I took her out of the pit myself. I would not have her walk out through the captive's gate, so I walked her up the throne stair and out through the high king's door, and the hold parted for us, and I felt her flinch once at the crowd, and I turned my shoulder to shield her without thinking, and she looked up at me and let me do it, and that small allowing undid me more than anything on the sand had. My council was waiting past the door, of course. They had watched the whole thing from the high gallery, and they came at me in a flock the moment we were through, and the eldest of them, Maelor, who had served my father and never let me forget it, planted himself in my path with his hands full of objections. My king, you cannot simply a captive before the whole court, the border pacts, the alliances, the Luna is a matter of state, you cannot. Maelor, I said, there are 3 highborn daughters whose fathers will take this as. Maelor's, look at her arm. He looked, I turned Ila's wrist gently to the torchlight. She let me, watching my counsel with that warder's stillness, and I showed him the ink. That is a Cethran master's knot, I said. The same order as the mark my mother carried, the mark you all pretended not to see under my bracer for 20 years because it embarrassed you that your Alpha King's mother came from a line of foreign peacekeepers. My mother was a warder. This woman is a warder. The bond between us is real. I have felt it ring through me all night, and I will not insult you by pretending you didn't watch it happen. She is my Luna. The only matter of state before you now is how quickly you can learn to be worthy of her. I let that sit. And there is the small matter of the Cethra Road, which my border pack turned red on a lie, breaking a people who never raised a blade against us. We will answer for that. Ila will tell us how. Starting tomorrow. Maelor opened his mouth. He closed it. He was a hard old wolf, but he was not a stupid one, and he had seen what the whole hold had seen, and after a long moment he inclined his head stiffly, but he did it. The Cethra Road was ill done, he said gruffly. I said so at the time. No one listened. He looked at Ila, and something almost like an apology moved through his old face. Luna, he said, and it was the first time any of them said it, and it was a beginning. That night I did not take her to any chamber near mine. I had a fear. I did not name it even to myself, but it was there, that after all of it she would lie awake in a strange wolf king's hold and feel the walls close as chains, and I would not have her feel that not for 1 hour, not from me. So I gave her the choice, as I had sworn I would give her every choice. There is a chamber in the East Tower, I told her at the top of the stair where the ways parted, with its own door to the wall walk and the open air, and a bar on the inside that only your hand can lift. No one enters it but by your leave, not even me, especially not me. I held out the heavy old key. It's yours. For as long as you're under my roof, whether that's 1 night or 50 years, that room is yours and no one's else, and you may bar it against the whole world, and I will stand a wall between you and anyone who tries the door. She looked at the key in my open hand for a long time. You keep giving me the door out, she said at last, quietly. The gate, the key, the choice. Why? Because you came to me in chains, I said, and the only way I know to prove that I am not the iron is to keep handing you the way free until you believe it. She took the key. Her fingers closed around it, and then, slowly, deliberately, watching my face the whole time, she reached out and folded my hand around it again over the key so that we held it together. Walk me up, she said. Bar it with me on the outside and go, and I'll lift it in the morning myself, and you'll know it was my hand that opened it and no one else's. That almost smile again, warmer now. That's how a warder learns to trust a wolf, Torin, one barred door at a time. I walked her up. I barred it with her on the far side, and I heard the bar drop into its bracket, and I stood a while in the cold of the wall walk outside it with my hand flat on the old wood, not because she needed guarding, but because I could not yet make my feet leave. And I thought about my mother pressing her thumb into my arm 40 years and one broken road ago, and I thought I understood at last what she had been trying to hand me all along. In the morning the bar lifted from the inside, and the door opened, and Ela stood in it with the gray dawn behind her and the red rings already fading from her wrists, and she looked at me standing where she had left me. I had gone and come back before light. I will confess that much, and something in her face changed, softened, settled, the way her body had settled on the sand before she ever moved. "You waited," she said. "I came back." She stepped out onto the wall walk beside me, into the cold, clean air, and we stood together looking out over the ashen reach going gold at its edges. And after a while, without looking at me, she slid her hand into mine, and the mark on my arm went warm and has stayed warm every day since. We remade the ring that spring. The killing sand came up and good earth went down, and where the pit had been there is a training yard now, roofed against the snow, and in it Ela teaches young wolves, and old ones who are not too proud, and Cord first of all, who turned out to have a gift for it, and a patience no one had ever thought to look for under all that muscle. They learn to move inside the reach and turn a body's weight and take the blade without spilling the blood. They learn, most of all, the thing that is the whole art and the hardest lesson in it, that the truest strength is the strength that can choose at the last inch to stop. The elders of the Cithran Wardens came north that summer, the scattered remnant of them, drawn by word that one of their own sat as Luna in the hold that had broken them. I met them at the border myself, on the Cithra road where it had all gone wrong, and I answered for it as I had sworn to with my knee in the dust of that road, and my bracer off, and the masters not bare on my arm. What was rebuilt between our peoples after that is a longer tale than this one, and it was Ela's work far more than mine, and I will let her tell it in her own time. But I will tell you the end of this one. Last night I could not sleep, and I went down to the training yard in the dark, the way I do sometimes, and I found it empty and quiet and smelling of clean straw where 20 years of my life it had smelled of blood. I stood in the middle of it, on the good earth where the killing sand had been, and I turned my arm over in the light of the one lamp and looked at my mother's mark, warm as a coal, and I thought of a chained woman looking up and finding me across a screaming ring. Ela found me there. She always finds me there. The bond is a two-ended thing, and she feels the pull of it as surely as I do. She came and stood beside me on the earth where the pit had been, and she did not ask what I was doing because she knew, and she took my marked arm in both her hands and pressed it, and the coal flared and steadied, and she said the thing she says on the nights she finds me here, the thing that is not a vow or a crown or a chain, but only the plain truth between two warders who chose each other in a place built for cruelty. You could have let them have their killing. She turned my arm so the mark caught the lamplight. You came down off the throne instead. Her thumb moved over the knot. That's the whole art, Torin, that's the whole of it. You could always choose to stop. I stopped, I said, the night you turned your back on a blade and gave a man his life. I have not started again since. And we stood a while longer in the dark yard where the pit had been, her hands on my mother's mark, and neither of us needed to say the rest, because the earth under our feet was saying it for us, and it will go on saying it long after we are both gone, that the strongest thing the Ashen Reach ever did was stop.